Big fat gypsy wedding. So people in the production, so they were putting together the most funny bits of the show, and that's not a true representation of what the culture is. You know, there's ways of editing things so they look funny or they look serious, and a lot of the show used violin music, and I don't know anybody that plays the violin anymore. But also there's brands as well that have appropriated the term gypsy. There's Gypsy Shine, and a brand that was part of the LGBTQ fashion movement years ago called Gypsy Sport. And I reached out to Gypsy Sport years ago and I asked why they used the term gypsy in their branding. And they didn't have an answer. They just thought it sounded great. But also this is the American term of gypsy. So I think we need to break down these stereotypes a little bit more, create a little bit more definition of what the idea of a gypsy is to what an actual person is. I think that's really important.
So yeah, I think, you know, again, about the media can be really damaging. Not that they can actually be very positive or very damaging, but in terms of looking at GRT communities, the negative stereotype is one that tends to be portrayed mostly, I think, against looking at viewing figures. And there's significant research that we have done recently that demonstrates the spikes in hate crime experienced by traveller communities after these programmes are aired, and when they're repeatedly aired as well. So it's, you know, it can be incredibly damaging.
It's this false idea of someone that you don't know, and that's a very dangerous weapon, I think, nowadays, especially with the internet.
Yeah, social media is a massive problem, I think, as well, isn't it? I know certainly young gypsies and travellers are having real problems with TikTok. Just in the last couple of weeks, there's been 3 12 and 13-year-olds that have died through suicide through social media bullying. So it's a very significant and serious issue that needs to be tackled. Okay, so the reality then is to say, you know, aside from the stereotypes, but the reality is still very negative for these communities. Gypsy, Roma and traveller people have the worst outcomes of any ethnic group across a range of areas, including health, education, employment, criminal justice, very high levels of social exclusion, poverty, particularly those living on roadside communities. There's a piece of research being done recently in Wales, I think, that's looking at the roadside communities and where they live. And it's very often on very poor land near motorways. So, you know, quite often quite dangerous environments, and certainly unhealthy environments. We've talked already a little bit about the stereotyping and the damage of that, and often it's referred to as the last acceptable form of racism that Gypsy and travellers experience. You know, very, very widespread prejudice and discrimination, and it's so common that it's normalised within these communities that it's just a fact of life. And there's stoicism and there's stoic attitudes as well. Actually, it's just something we have to live with, but you know, that shouldn't be the case. Again, poor health and lower life expectancy of between 10 and 12 years, lower than the mainstream population, due to quite often living conditions, as we said, poverty, mental health, so much lower life expectancies. Linked to that, very high numbers of intergenerational and often traumatic bereavements, and suicide is significant in young men, 6 to 7 times higher than in the mainstream population. So all of these things have a cumulative effect on mental health and well-being. And I'm going to pass back over to Jason now to talk about the hidden ascription and known as passing. You'll be able to do that more eloquently than I can.
Yeah, so I've been told that I'm lucky because I can pass for someone that isn't a gypsy. So if you just saw me about, you just think, oh, I'm another student. It's not something that I at all pride myself on. I act the way I do, and I just am the way I am. And it's something that gets told to me inside my community and outside of my community, and it just leaves you as a person kind of like with a bit of an identity crisis, which I've never enjoyed. I'm kind of like, right, what am I then? Am I one or the other? Should I benefit off of being passing or not? I've had situations where I've been in work, and there's been a customer come up to me because we've had travelers or gypsies in the shop, and they expect me to throw them out. And I'm like, oh, I am one. Like, we're living in a very weird stage now, but also the whole passing thing I've never fully enjoyed at all. I don't feel like as a person you need to walk up to people and define yourself straight away, but it shouldn't be swiped aside as soon as they find out where you come from, because you pass. It's not something I enjoy at all.
It's very, very common aspects, and it's
Very.
a protective strategy that's often used as well to prevent the hate crime. And again, has implications for mental health and well-being. So maintaining this dual identity and hiding description of who you really are, it can be quite challenging. And if we sort of think then about how that might impact on children in the classroom, in terms of their learning, if they are not able to fully express who they are, or they're pretending to be someone else to fit in so that they feel protected. So we've already spoken a little bit about hate crime and the significance of that reported daily experiences. And school bullying is still really notable and extremely concerning, given that where we are in the 21st century, that we still have significant bullying within these communities. We know that bullying is associated with adverse childhood experiences and impacts on outcomes. And the findings of the hate crime research that we did recently was that 78% of our respondents highlighted school bullying as a significant hate-related incidents, and intergenerationally again, and this has an impact on parents' views and experiences of schooling and the trust they do or don't have within the education system for their own children. So if we were talking to children, parents and grandparents that were all talking about the same experiences of bullying and saying that actually nothing had changed across those generations. And that, that's incredibly sad to hear that we haven't actually moved on. But also what it does is brings into the very early life, very early victimization through hate crime and through bullying incidents, and again impacts on belonging, well-being, and leads back to the hiding of identity and the passing that Jason was just talking about.
Yeah, I think going back also to passing, it coming from a generational thing. You're told to stay quiet and keep it hidden because you'll risk losing your job or risk bullying. It's something that still needs to be developed through schools, that we teach students as a class rather than single people out as well, that everybody comes from a different upbringing. I think that's very important.
And the other thing to think about is digital exclusion, and I think this was really highlighted across education during the pandemic, that there was an assumption, wasn't there, that we could all very easily move to online learning, and that everybody has access to computers and internet access. And it was recognised that many children didn't have this access. but again is significantly greater within the travelling community, that again, depending on where they're living, they may not have access. I was talking to a local colleague, somebody's got a mic on again. Okay. From the boater community, and she was talking about how they have to move. If they're living on canals, they have to move their boats every 2 weeks. So she was saying how difficult it is to be able to do that, to legally move your boat every 2 weeks, because that's the requirement, and to have access to internet to do homework. And again, often her son was chastised for not completing his homework. And it wasn't a case of not wanting to, but it was a case of not being able to, because it was all done online. So some things to think about there in terms of how we manage our educational experiences as well. I'd like to just take a moment, or ask you to just take a moment, really, just think about all of the experiences we've just shared, the lifestyle, the living arrangements, environments, how these experiences might, and how they might, if you've got children that are, seemingly distracted, or perhaps, are recognised as having behavioural incidents, why might that be? All children's behaviour is for a reason, isn't it? And it's about unpicking what those reasons are. And for these families, they live with significant challenges daily throughout their lives. So we're moving to looking more now at just the educational landscape. And again, it's equally grim in that Gypsy, Roma and travellers have the lowest educational outcomes of all ethnic minority groups. And you can see, their GCSE level 8 attainment scores are significantly lower than the average, at 23.3% and 31% for Irish travellers, against the average of 50.2%. So they are and remain really significantly much lower than other communities. And again, this is nothing new. This has been the same for a number of years. The Plowden Report in 1967 recognised the need to improve Gypsy and travellers' outcomes, and recognised that actually that their needs couldn't be effectively met or measured in the same way that we were using to measure mainstream populations. They required, particular and specific attention. And some of this is linked to the way we record data and the way we monitor, and in terms of, again, how Gypsy, Roma and traveller, showmen and boaters ascribe their identities. So we never have a true picture of how many we have within the room. So we'll have some that will ascribe, some that will hide their identity. They actually have a category to identify. They're again, blocked into the umbrella term of GRT. So while some don't want to identify, others don't have the option to identify. And there are still issues around this sort of data collection currently. But after the Plowden Report, this led to the introduction of traveller support services and traveller teachers. But again, we know, these are the first services that are generally cut if there are cuts in funding. And I know the traveller education worker, she's just one person for the whole of the county. So 30 years on from Plowden, we had some significant looking at it in with Estelle Morris, the Junior Education Minister, who continued to say that the problems with exclusion and educational failure were particularly acute for Gypsy and traveller children. So again, nothing had changed, nothing had moved on. They still continued to be excluded. and levels of achievement remained lower than any other minority group. And here we are in 2022, again, with the same situation. We have still this very low achievement, significant numbers of exclusions within the community as well. So we do really need to do something to look at how we can improve these outcomes for Gypsy Roma traveller children. And the GTRSB pledge that we'll talk about a little bit later hopes to start to do that. Jason, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I feel like it's just there are great people out there doing amazing work with the Gypsy community, from what I've learned through Carol and through previous experiences. But also it's still a very outdated system. There needs to be some kind of structure that kind of weans people into education. You can't force someone from the community into education, because it'll just have a backfiring effect where they'll hate going into education even more. But instead there'll be a slight benefit system, I think would be very, very great, because there'll be something like a certificate or an award thing that they can use in their own personal businesses and their own personal lives. I think that's a really good system to look at. Everybody's in construction now, everybody's into plumbing. So if there was some kind of format, that would be really, really beneficial, I think.
I think you said what you said there is about applying the learning, isn't it, into the community and making it feel relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So the key issues we have for in changing this and encouraging a more positive approach to education, and so that these community members actually feel part of educational communities and have positive outcomes, are a complete change of focus into a more positive approach rather than the negative that we currently have in many places. It's not to say everywhere, because there are some pockets of extremely good practice, but generally the feeling is that it could be better. So again, we have feelings of exclusion, not belonging, the othering of becoming from these communities, and it starts really early. As we've already talked about bullying, and these are happening in primary schools, so we need to start changing and having a more positive outcomes from when children start school. And when we did some interviews with some of the children school experiences, we were looking, as Jason was just saying, about curriculum reform really, and the need to actually make some of what we're doing relevant to communities and the roles they're going into, but also embedding recognition of GRT history and cultural heritage into the curriculum. So at the moment we have Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month, the same as we have Black History Month, but these can be quite tokenistic if we're not careful. So we need to actually embed them across the curriculum in a much greater way, so that we are raising and demonstrating cultural awareness much earlier within school. And that's through with peers, but also teachers as well, because as I said earlier, these communities are protected by legislation, and as such, racism is unacceptable in the same way as it should be and is with any other minority groups. And racist bullying, school, that we've highlighted here, it should be recognising it should be recognised as racist bullying. It should be recorded as racist bullying as well, which often isn't the case. So we've talked about that one. So again, we've already mentioned as well, I think the hate crime, that it starts in early childhood, and then often we will have the hidden ascription, and or children removed from school as well, and that's one of the problems with early removal of school. Quite often it is linked to bullying as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an interview extract, again linked to the hiding of description, the bullying that is experienced. And it was, you can see here, a Romany Gypsy mother talking about her children. And let you read that for a moment. And for me, the key word in here is where she talks about them being schizophrenic, having two different personalities. So again, it's this sense of belonging, sense of identity that is getting lost within these communities, because to protect themselves, they're hiding their heritage. They're hiding, instead of being proud of and sharing it, it's becoming suppressed because of the negativity that they experience. So again, you can consider then the impact that doing this has on an adult, but also the greater impact then that doing this has on the young children. So we see really significant issues with mental health and well-being within these communities, and you can begin to see why when they're having these kind of experiences and they're having to live with a dual personality, or to hide who they really are, and the impact that has on mental health and well-being.
It can also lead to a kid just worrying if their best friend finds out where they come from. That's the thing that I grew up with, is if they found out where I come from, how I woke up in the morning, would they be my friend the next day? That's a small worry to have, but it's, to a kid, that's quite big as well.
So what often happens, because school experiences are not always positive, we find that increasingly parents either remove their children from school into elective homeschooling, or as mentioned earlier, there's a huge amount of exclusion, and for some schools the easy option for them is to off-roll the children, or to encourage parents to remove them into homeschooling. So it's a growing trend where children are being removed because they're seen as difficult. So rather than trying to work with parents, resolve the issues, develop trust within the schools and have positive experience, they're removed. Families feel then that they don't have many options, and it's like a sort of a flight mechanism. Again, the protective strategy within the community is, as parents, as we all would want to protect our children, we'll remove them from the system where the problem is existing. And as we know, again, there's very little support in terms of home education, so they're often given little support, little resources, perhaps not aware of support mechanisms that are around them. So it exacerbates the early leaving of education, and impacts on those figures that we looked at earlier with the low achievements and low outcomes. And one of the main issues here is parental education. We've got parents with low literacy levels or limited education themselves. They're going to have a limited ability to support their children as well.
Yeah, I feel like when you've got a homeschooling system that is the parent looking after and teaching the child, this parent also left school at a young age, that system doesn't work. But also having someone, we had a woman when I was younger called Mrs. King that would go around all the traveling sites, and there are people like this that work from the education system, and they do a checkup, or they keep making sure that they're doing the homework and doing the schooling. that's beneficial. But the system of the parent homeschooling the child, that is not I don't think it's a sustainable or realistic idea. It's something, I think something could be built on that more, because an uneducated mum cannot educate the child.
So some of the strategies for change that we need to see, and as I say, there are examples of schools where there is excellent practice, and they really do promote an inclusive environment, for all of their pupils, wherever their background. So this is happening in places, but it's about looking at making it broader, so that we're looking at good practice everywhere, as opposed to pockets of good practice. So we need to promote, an inclusive environment. That's a requirement, isn't it, for the government, that we're working inclusively. But at the moment, I would say, Gypsy, Roma and Traveller children are still often excluded rather than included. So as I said, we need, the culture and heritage to be evident, to be recognised, and to provide a positive sense of belonging. We need to develop strong and trusting relationships with parents. Absolutely crucial, developing trust and relationship with parents of the school is fundamental for the children to stay in school. And often this is recognising that parents may well have low literacy levels. So often schools will say, oh, well, we didn't get anything back from them, we don't hear anything. So it's recognising that they may not be able to read the literature that's sent out. They may not have, as we said earlier, the online access to anything. So recognising and looking for alternative ways of engaging with these parents, so that those, the trust can be built. Embedding and celebrating GRT culture and heritage throughout the curriculum to improve understanding. And this is both children and staff, because a lot of the issues that arise are just purely because of a lack of understanding of cultural norms and cultural expectations. So staff development, so training, looking at those cultural responsibilities, recognising the needs of the children. So recognising again the need to travel, perhaps, sending appropriate work with the children, and celebrating when they come back, if they've been away, if they've been to fairs, using that as a learning opportunity. And as I said earlier, to monitor and report Gypsy, Roma and Traveller bullying incidents as racist bullying, as required under the Equality Act, because they do have ethnic status. So any bullying towards them, should be counted as racist in the same way as it would in any other minority group.
I think it's the show and tell technique in schools. I think that's very beneficial when a kid gets to show and tell their animal or something. When it comes to someone going to a fair, and it's such a great cultural show of love, respect, and the culture appreciating itself. Encourage that when the kid comes back. If the family's open to the school knowing about Gypsy heritage, then the kid has so much to tell and so much great stuff to display to other children about what Gypsy culture actually is. Just coming from a fair, coming from a kid's perspective is great, I think. But yeah, I think the pledge is doing, so far it's got a really strong structure. Yeah.
A lovely introduction into the pledge. So thank you.
Lovely.
So the Gypsy, Roma, Traveller, Sherman and Boater pledge for schools has been developed from an initial one that was developed into higher education, recognising that there's a very limited amount, very few numbers of Gypsy, Roma and Travellers in higher education. It's around 200 at any one time. Now, again, recognising that that's those that are identifying as Gypsy, Roma and Traveller, not the ones that we don't know about, who, so there may well be more. But the higher education pledge was developed again to encourage a more inclusive environment, to try and encourage more of people from these communities into higher education. But actually it needs to start earlier than that, really, isn't it? As we've said, unless there's a positive early experience of schooling, and we can get these young people to stay in school so that they can achieve the qualifications and you know, to be able to progress into university and higher education, we need to be starting earlier. So alongside the HE Pledge, we have developed the Pledge for Schools. We launched it in June. And again, the aim is to develop communities of practice, to share best practice, to improve practice, and to enable more positive school experiences for GTRSB children. It's been created in partnership with, say, the communities themselves, teachers, higher education, academics, and the Anti-Bullying Alliance, who kindly allowed us to adapt a schools audit that they've been developed to use within the pledge as well. So it consists of a firm commitment by a school to take steps to, as I said, improve and support access, retention, and outcomes for GTRSB pupils. And it's designed to both promote and support best practice by creating, welcoming environments, monitoring data so we can have more accurate data on all of the groups that we're working with. So, say currently it only includes Gypsy, Roma and Traveller, but we need to change that so we can identify showman and boated children that are currently missed from the school census categories. It needs to ensure that whole school inclusive practice is developed, and links to both widening participation activities, outreach. So we're engaging again, supporting and developing trust with families as well. So it really is a community approach. So if you're teaching within schools, we really would encourage you to consider this and perhaps encourage your school to take the pledge. And what we're hoping long term is that actually we're not just talking about schools that do have Gypsy, Roma and Traveller people within them, but actually for all schools, because we could have a child enter into us tomorrow, couldn't we? So it's about recognising and celebrating all of the community. So to take the pledge, effectively what we're asking schools to do is to just make this firm commitment to meeting these core principles, so that there's a named contact point for Gypsy, Roma Travellers pupils or potential pupils and families. That school will identify and publish that they support pupils from these groups. That we do improve our data monitoring, both pupils but staff as well. So recognising actually that we're not just talking about, again, children, we're talking about the whole school community. Building and supporting this welcoming culture, celebrating and commemorating cultural histories and cultural awareness, and say developing outreach and engagement with local Gypsy, Roma, Traveller, showman and boater communities. And then what we ask schools to do from that is to just send us a small either video or a statement of commitment, and we're hoping to then develop a network of practice that we can work with and support and improve outcomes for these communities. If you are interested in taking the pledge, the link here is for the website, which will give you further information, or my contact details are there as well. and to enable us to actually do some of these things, certainly in terms of celebrating and increasing our cultural awareness, is to engage with key dates. So there's some key calendar dates here in terms of recognizing some of the key dates here. So Holocaust Remembrance Day is again recognizing the Roma genocide that was evident within the Second World War. The Holocaust generally tends to refer to the Jewish communities, but actually there were 500,000 Roma killed within that process as well. So it's about recognising that, and they're not often recognised. International Roma Day there in April, Gypsy Roma Traveller History Month in June, and there's a European Holocaust Remembrance Day in August. And then for the Showman, World Fun Fair Month in September. So there are some significant dates across the year, and this again makes it a way of embedding across the year rather than just doing something for Gypsy Roma Travel and History Month in June. There's some further resources here that you can access, and there's a lot of teaching resources available as well to support some of these things. And just before we go to questions, I wonder if my video will play. Is to what have I done? To lose it is to just share this final comment from our.
Oh, we can't hear this, Carol.
Can you not hear it?
No.
Okay. Okay. The slides will go out, so hopefully, I'm not sure whether it's my sound but it'll be there. So hopefully, when the slides go out, you can listen to Janie sharing her experience. But as she said just there, she had 9 months or 6 months of formal education, and she has gone on to be awarded an MBE for her support work, and is just in the process of finishing her PhD. So again, it's a positive role model. And I think the other thing we need to do is to work with community members like Janie, like Jason, so that again, younger people coming through have positive role models that they can look up to, and see that actually, if you are a Gypsy, Roma, Traveller and Boater, you can achieve positively within education. Wow. Just going to let Jason have final words now, and then if anyone has any questions, we're more than happy to take any questions. So.
Yeah, any questions, just send them our way. We absolutely love answering questions, but it's good to have a person from the community that other traveling boys and girls and young kids can see, that sometimes they need to see it to believe it kind of thing. And in order, me doing my fashion BA, I've had through the pledge and through uni and graduating, I've met so many people that aren't educated, but they do a lot of art, gypsy art on Instagram, and I've reached out and connected with so many people, and I didn't even know they existed before I graduated. It's crazy.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, well, thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you've taken something away there. So if anyone has got any questions, please do ask.
Oh, Lisa, I think it's got one.
Yep, Lisa?
No, I was just doing a little round of applause to say thank you very much.
Oh, thank
Thank
you. Great.
Thank you. Really, really interesting and very useful, and lots to think about, I'm sure, for many of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Any other questions? People have been quite shy today.
I get all the way from my education.
Unmute and talk.
Ready for lunch, I expect, aren't they? They've been busy this morning listening to everything else. So.
Yes, it's been an intense morning. Can any school sign up to the pledge, or how does
Yes.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, when you get the slides, either email me, or just you can go onto the website and have a look. But literally, all we ask is for a statement of commitment from your head teacher, CEO, whoever is the most appropriate person to do that. And then what we'll add you to sort of the website, and that links you. We haven't really got the schools network set up yet, because the schools pledge is very new, and one of the first things we want to do really is to look at, I think, how the best way to do that networking is. With the HE one, we have a particular sort of, there's an HE network email that we use. So I think for the schools, it's looking at what will be the best way to actually connect people. But with the HE one, there's a lot of people share research, they share best practice, they share questions, ideas. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of potential within the school one. To say it's literally been live about 2 weeks, so so it's very much in its infancy, but we've had a lot of interest. We have got some schools signed up already, and yeah, absolutely, any school, and we're really encouraging, whilst we really want schools that do have GTRSB pupils within them, equally we want those that haven't as well, because this is about educating all of us. It's not just about supporting those communities, it's about that wider cultural recognition, cultural knowledge, to try and sort of change the stereotype, really. And it's it's hugely ambitious, but we have to. But
it's important. It's incredibly.
It's absolutely important.
Definitely.
It really
and I think I'm from like sort of an SEN background, so the education, health, and care plans is another barrier that sometimes really is felt by these families, as I'm sure you're well aware. The process itself, the paperwork, the lack of sort of some acceptance of special educational needs in lots of cases. It's a bit of a minefield, isn't it? So I think any understanding that schools can have and support with is invaluable. Really impressive. Well, thank you, guys.
Please do drop me a line then, and when you get the details, and we can we can connect further. So thank you.